Hello and welcome to Bryan Lomax Movie Talk. Now, it's been a while since I've reviewed a Bond film, but hey, we're back once again, and this time we're in the Timothy Dalton era, and we're starting with his first film, The Living Daylights. This film is directed by John Glenn, who did a few of the last Roger Moore films, and he's back on board here with a somewhat darker tone than we're used to in Bond, maybe a little bit more serious tone than we're used to, and that's primarily down to Timothy Dalton, who brings that with him. We start the film with a training exercise which introduces us to our new 007, and this training exercise is actually, it's well shot and it's well choreographed. I like the action scene in it. There's a bit of a thing on a car in which Bond leaps onto the top of the car to pursue a man who has killed off some of the other people in his training exercise, the other 00 agents. And I like I say, I like the way it's shot. I find the action exciting, and it's good to have a training exercise at the start of a Bond film that is actually like that, unlike the one we had in Never Say Never Again, which obviously is an unofficial Bond film, and of course From Russia with Love, which I didn't really rate as highly as a lot of people do, but again, the training exercise that starts that film didn't really make a right lot of sense in many aspects. But this one, it does. It's quite thrilling and yeah, good way to start the film. The opening titles, however, I must say, are a little bit bland. The imagery that's on show here by now has become a little bit pat. It's become a little bit outdated. There's not really much done with the themes throughout this sequence. Like in quite a few Bond films, we have had like a thematic element in it that relates to the film. I don't really get that sense here in this opening credit sequence, and I really do not like the song. This is just subpar at best with regards to Bond theme songs. So once the credits are over, we basically are in Russia, and there's a man named Koskov. He's a Russian diplomat, and he's wanting to defect from Russia, and Bond has been asked actually personally by Koskov, this man who wants to defect, to basically protect him from snipers. They assume that there's going to be people after him, so he wants Bond on the job. He wants Bond to be the man to get him out. Surely enough, there is a sniper there, this woman who was also at a recital just moments before. She was playing a cello, and for that reason, when Bond spots her, he catches her off guard by shooting her rifle instead, which does kind of injure her hand a little bit. He gets Koskov across the border, and that's it. Gets him out of the country. Now, this whole sequence, it does set up some intrigue, I think, and it does it quite well, and it sets up a lot of the main characters, all within the short space of time. And one of these characters is another agent, a British agent by the name of Saunders, and at the beginning of this film he comes off as a little bit of, well, a bit of a numpty really. He's a by-the-book agent, doesn't really want Bond on the job, doesn't like Bond from what we can see, and yeah, he's a bit of a noob, it must be said. However, that does change later on in the film, and I like that aspect. I like that they've done this, because there's many times throughout these kind of films, particularly in the Bond franchise, where we do get these characters who are unlikable, primarily because they're the complete opposite of Bond. We're set up to not like them. So I like that they have a character progression with this guy, and that in later scenes, when he does finally decide to help Bond, we do grow to like him. There are a few moments of kind of slapstick humour during this whole sequence when they're getting Koskov out of Russia, and that's primarily because of this worker, this woman who helps Bond get Koskov out, and she's like a stereotypically butch Russian woman. This was the image, I think, that a lot of people had of Russian women back in the day. It doesn't really come off very well. The humour doesn't work. I don't like it personally. I don't like this character. I don't see why they had to go this route. It's not funny, as is often the case with humour in Bond films. From here, Bond visits Q, and he looks through some KGB files of hit women actually, that are on the KGB files, basically looking for this woman who he saw, who was playing the cello and then became the sniper. He's not convinced that he's going to find her there, because he doesn't believe that she's a professional. professional, but he does the business anyway. He looks for her, and funnily enough, she's not there. From here we get a typical kind of scene in Q's office where we're seeing a lot of the gadgets and crazy inventions that Q is inventing, and there's actually quite a funny one, which is the Ghetto Blaster, because it blasts a rocket launcher out of the Ghetto Blaster, and it's actually quite amusing. I enjoyed it, and these kind of things, these Q scenes, I don't often enjoy, to be honest, but this one I quite enjoyed. Also, a little bit of a scene here with Moneypenny. She doesn't do herself any favours, it must be said, when it comes to romancing Bond. She drops a line here about inviting him over anytime to come and listen to her Barry Manilow collection. Well, if that doesn't put someone off, I don't know what will. After this, we see a hitman named Necros, this kind of tall, blonde, typically European kind of bad guy that we've seen quite often in Bond films, to be honest, taking out a milkman. Yeah, he assassinates a milkman. Now this, of course, is just to take on the disguise of this milkman while he infiltrates the safe house where Bond and MI5 are keeping Koskov. It's in this safe house that Koskov is telling M and Bond and a few others about the replacement for General Gogol, a man named Pushkin, who he says is basically the next Stalin. Whilst breaking into this safe house, Necros has a fight sequence with some random agent, and this is one of my problems here, because this is a really good fight scene, and it's a shame, really. It's a pity that it's not between Bond and Necros. We just have this random agent who we're not really going to have any feelings for, don't really sympathise with on any level, because we don't know him. So yeah, it's a bit bizarre, to be honest, to have such a big, well-shot, well-choreographed fight sequence that isn't between a villain and Bond, because quite frankly there are no other fight sequences in this film that are as good as this one, so to not have it with Bond is a bit head scratching, to be honest. So Necros manages to capture Koskov and kind of whip off with him on a helicopter. He kidnaps him, and M after that decides that Bond should be the man to track down Pushkin, because obviously they believe Pushkin is responsible for this kidnap. So now Bond is assigned with that task. At this point, Moneypenny has tracked down the cellist, the sniper woman, from a newspaper article that she's found, and to be honest, this is one of the first times that I can actually recall Moneypenny being useful and not just being there for a bit of eye candy for Bond, a bit of kind of verbal foreplay. Yeah, she's actually useful in Bond's quest. She gives him information that gets him going on the next leg of his journey. So Bond tracks down this woman called Kara Milovi, and he finds out that her rifle had blanks in it, so she never intended to kill Koskov. So Bond pretends that he's working with Koskov, working for him, and that he's going to take Kara to Koskov. So she joins him, and they escape from her house because she's got a tail on her, one of Pushkin's men, and they get out. And to be honest, the way that they get out, it's a little bit lame. They do the old kind of sticking like a broomstick up, or well, in this case a cello case, and putting a coat over it and a hat and making it look like a person trapped in a phone box, and it's a bit lame. It doesn't really work. The speed at which they would need to have done that, because they do it while a bus passes by, it doesn't work. It comes off a bit corny, a bit cheesy, but it moves the story along. It gets them out of there, and we're onto a pretty decent car chase actually that comes after this, as the Russian police try to track her and Bond down. This car chase obviously allows Bond to try out some new gadgets in the new Aston Martin that he's got, all pretty decent, pretty entertaining. It's nice to see the car chase move to the ice when Bond has these spikes that come out of the tyres, and there's a really nice explosion on the ice as well. Just a really well filmed action sequence. Again though, a little bit lame how they get across the border as they ski down a hill in a cello case. From here we get a scene between Pushkin and a new man, Brad Whitaker, who is an arms dealer basically, but he fancies himself as a great military leader. It's quite embarrassing actually at times when we see this character. I think it's good. It comes across as a well-written character, because he does have these grand ideas about who he actually is when he clearly doesn't live up to any of them. But basically Pushkin cancels a deal with Whitaker and he demands his money back. So yeah, that sets up something that is going to come later on in the film. But for now, it's just a little bit of intrigue. Why is Pushkin going to this guy? Why is he cancelling an order with him? Who here is actually the bad guy? It's from here that Whitaker meets up with Koskov and tells him that Pushkin has pulled out of a deal. And Koskov advises Whitaker to basically move up their timetable and essentially take out a British agent to show the British that they're serious, or from the British kind of point of view, that Pushkin is serious, that Pushkin is actually the guy who's taking out these British agents, when in actual fact it is them. At this point in the film, I am kind of enjoying these two villains. I like their team up. I like the dynamic between them. They're two very different people. One is more of an intellectual, not much of a fighter, but more of a strategist. And the other one is someone who fancies himself as a strategist, but isn't really the brains of the operation. He's a bit more of a thug. He's just an arms dealer. And also, I like the henchman for now. He doesn't have any quirks, so to speak, in the traditional sense. You know, we've always had henchmen with metal teeth, or a razor sharp bowler hat, or a metal hand. In this case, we don't get that. We just get this guy who's just a European looking guy, quite big, quite physical, but he's got a lot of menace. So this is where we are reintroduced to Saunders. Saunders comes back and Bond basically tells Saunders what's been going on, and Saunders comes around to Bond's way of thinking and actually goes so far as to say he'll help him get papers to get out of Vienna and get back home. So yeah, this is when Saunders becomes likeable. We kind of start to sympathise with him in many ways. You can kind of understand why he's had the opinion of Bond that he does. Because Bond, let's face it, he is a bit of an outsider. He doesn't do things by the book. It's not hard to understand why this guy would have a dislike for him. What is hard to understand, and which is often the case in films like this, is when a character like this continues to have a dislike for someone like Bond, even though Bond is getting results. Whereas here, it's not the case. Bond has got results, he's shown those results to Saunders, and as a result, Saunders is now coming around to Bond's way of thinking and is willing to help him out. And that's what I like about this character. I like that progression. So Bond and Saunders arrange to meet up at a fairground later on, once Saunders has got the papers for Bond. He also gives Bond some new information, which is who bought the cello for Cara. She has this very expensive cello, and yeah, it turns out that Whitaker is the man who bought it for her. A bit dumb, I think, that he would allow that to kind of go on record. If they're going to use her in the way that they have, it'd be very easy, as is evident here, to trace that cello back to her and back to him. But as I've said before, this guy isn't the sharpest tool in the box, so I go along with it, and it's a nice way of linking Whitaker to Koskov. So Bond now knows that Koskov and Whitaker are in league with each other. So Bond thanks Saunders, and Saunders leaves, but before he can, he is killed by Necros in a bit of an elaborate trap that Necros has planned for him. Why he didn't just shoot him with a sniper rifle, I don't know, but yeah, Saunders is killed. And what I like about this scene is Bond's reaction. You can tell Bond has feelings in this moment, and I think if this was an older Bond film, if this was a Moore or a Connery era Bond film, I think Bond would just see this thing happening, kind of shrug it off and get on his way. Now he does pursue Necros, but fails to capture him. But in that moment when Saunders is taken out, you do see feelings, you do see kind of regret, I guess, some sympathy in Bond's eyes, and that's down to the performance by Dalton, and I like seeing this in Bond. I like seeing that actually this guy is human. It's from here that Bond goes to meet Pushkin. He finally tracks him down and basically puts a gun to his head. He wants to get the information out of him. He accuses him, obviously, of being the man responsible for all that's happened, and Pushkin basically doesn't have a clue. He doesn't know what's been going on, and Bond soon realises that he doesn't actually have anything to do with it. But this whole sequence, the way it plays out, is it's quite interesting. It's quite risque in many parts. We do get to see nipple in this scene. Now, we've always had sex in Bond films, we've always had innuendo, but I don't think we've ever seen anything quite as graphic within the flesh department. It's not like full-on nudity or anything. We're not full frontal, but just the way it's shot, yeah, we see nipple, which is... It kind of caught me off guard, to be honest, given that this is still a PG-rated film. But this sequence is quite good. I like how Bond gets in to the room. I like the way he takes out Pushkin's guard. And I like the face-off between Bond and Pushkin. There's a lot of tension there. You do wonder if Bond's going to shoot this man. But the fact that they team up together is quite nice. It's quite a nice touch. So from here, Bond and Pushkin fake Pushkin's death. In order for Pushkin to help Bond, to help the MI5, they figure it's going to be best if they get Pushkin out of the equation, if they pretend that Bond has done the job that Koskov and Whitaker kind of hired MI5 to do, kind of manipulated them into doing. Bond has to go on the run because obviously he's now the prime target for this supposed death of Pushkin, but he's picked up by Felix Leiter, picked up by two women who work for Felix Leiter, and then after this we see Whitaker and Koskov basically being told by Necros that Bond has done his job. But it's during the scene that Koskov gets a phone call, and it's only in the scene just after this that we realise that that phone call was from Kara. And during this phone call, Koskov tells Kara that Bond is actually a KGB agent who is trying to track him down to kill him. For this reason, when Bond tells Kara the truth, she doesn't believe him, and instead she decides to drug him and wait for Whitaker and Koskov to show up. And if that all sounds like things are just happening a little bit too fast, well, they probably are. The pace on this film is quite forceful, I must say. Things do move along at quite a pace, despite the fact that this is actually quite a long Bond film. It's about 2 hours and 10 minutes or something like that. But it doesn't really feel that long. It feels like an average kind of length. And that's because you're always getting information. I like the way it's written. Generally, there isn't really many scenes here that you could take out that would help the story move along faster, because everything is quite necessary with regards to giving information about characters and giving information about plot. So from that perspective, this is a very good film with regards to the writing for a Bond film. So Koskov plans to hand Bond over to the Russians for Pushkin's murder. He's also transporting some diamonds. When he takes Bond over to Afghanistan, of all places, he's transporting these diamonds, and it turns out that these diamonds are actually the payment that Pushkin wanted back from Whitaker. Bond escapes custody of the Russian guards that are holding him prisoner by using a gas keyring that Q gave him. He basically whistles and it squirts out gas that knocks out all the guards. So he takes Kara with him, but he also frees a man who helps him during this kind of tussle, this fight, who just so happens to be a member of the Mujahideen. So Bond asks this man for help from the Mujahideen. He wants to get back to the airbase where he can stop Koskov, and he tells this man that the weapons that Koskov is bringing into the country will also be used against the Afghans, against the Mujahideen. And it all gets a little bit confusing, to be honest, at this point. It's hard to understand exactly what Koskov's plot is. Is he bringing in guns? Is he bringing in drugs? Is he bringing in diamonds? He's using diamonds from Pushkin to buy drugs. But but also weapons are being brought in somewhere. It all gets a little bit muddled, but suffice to say, Koskov is trying to buy drugs with these diamonds, which he can then sell to other markets for a profit and make a profit on them. Not quite sure where the weapons comes into it, whether they're part of the payment or whether he's getting the weapons from someone or giving the weapons to someone. It's all a bit of a moot point by this point. You just want to see an action sequence, and to be honest, it has been quite a while since we've seen a decent action sequence. Thankfully, that action sequence does come as we get into our climax with Koskov and Necros and Bond. Bond is taken back to this airbase. He's helped by the Mujahideen, who basically storm this airbase. There's a lot of explosions, things blowing up as the Mujahideen attack the Russian military here. Bond obviously goes after Koskov and Necros. We do have a bit of a fight scene here with Necros on a plane, and I must say, it's a little bit disappointing. Necros and Bond do end up out of the back of a plane. They're hanging off these sandbags. From that aspect, it is quite thrilling. I like the way it's shot. There's some really good stunt work here. You can tell that some stuntmen actually hung from the back of this plane, and total respect to that. But after the build-up that we've had, seeing just how much of a badass Necros is, the fact that he had that really awesome fight sequence earlier with this other random agent, the fact that we don't really get a decent fight sequence between him and Bond is a little bit disappointing. They just kind of hang there on these bags. Bond gets a few kicks in and eventually Necros falls off. And again, like I say, it's really nicely shot. We've seen before that John Glenn handles these things quite well with the way he shoots them. He's done quite a few aerial sequences. He did the parachute stuff in Moonraker, I think it was, beginning of Moonraker. But here it's just, I wanted to see some fists thrown, you know. I wanted to see a good tussle between these two opposing agents, and it just doesn't really come off. That being said, there's still a lot of other nice action bits around it. We get a nice stunt when Kara and Bond fall out the back of a plane in the car, something that the Fast and the Furious franchise would later go on to use, but maybe to greater effect. It's not handled the best way, it must be said, because when Bond and Kara exit the back of this plane in this car, it seems like they're not really that high off the ground, and then they look up and see the plane going into the side of a mountain, and all of a sudden the plane is right back up in the air. So yeah, it's not framed very well, I don't think, but we get it. We get the picture. But before they go out the plane, Bond does help the Mujahideen in return for the help they gave them by dropping a bomb on top of one of their tanks and destroying a bridge. So we do get some nice bursts of action around this semi-fight sequence, which could have been a lot better, I think. From here, Bond goes to arrest Whitaker, and also it turns out Koskov is back there staying at his house, so he's going to be able to pick up both of these guys in one fell swoop. Now the showdown between Whitaker and Bond, again, it's a little bit disappointing. It's a little bit stupid as well in many ways, because Whitaker uses this contraption, this gun that has a face guard on it, and Bond continually shoots at this face guard. And surely in this situation a body shot would have been more appropriate. He has ample opportunity to get one in, and he's obviously a good enough shot to do that. He's a trained hitman, but he doesn't. He keeps on going for the face, despite the fact that, as I say, Whitaker's got this bizarre contraption that is protecting his face. So it doesn't really wash with me. The showdown itself, again, it's just two guys kind of walking around a room and taking pot shots at each other, but no actual fighting involved. It's a little bit of a letdown after what has actually been a really good Bond film. Bond kills Whitaker, takes him out, and arrests Koskov, hands him over to Pushkin. There's a nice little scene there between Koskov and Pushkin where Koskov tries to worm his way out of things and tries to make up excuses, make up like lies, more lies. This guy kind of thrives on these bizarre stories he creates. He's one of those kind of characters, and I like it. I like the way that the actors play it. It's quite humorous, and it's a nice way to go out on this particular villain. We obviously close the movie with Bond catching up with Kara and eventually getting down and dirty with her. This is pretty much what we've come to expect from a Bond film. This is the way they all end, so why should this one be any different? Now we do end the film again with another incredibly dull title song. This isn't the same song that was in the opening credits, it's a different one, but it is equally as dull as the opening one. So the music for this film overall, not particularly great. In the song department, that is. The score, on the other hand, is quite adequate actually. It does a pretty decent job throughout the film, but the songs, completely unmemorable. Now I know it sounds like I've been quite down on this film towards the end, and I do think that the ending in many aspects is quite unsatisfying, but on the whole it is a good film. It's got two moderately decent villains. We have had better, but we have had much worse, but for me, as I say, it's just the build-up doesn't quite have the payoff that I wanted. I wanted to see a really good fight between Bond and Necros. We don't really get that, and the other two villains, they're kind of taken out in a bit of a lackluster way, but overall, like I say, Timothy Dalton, first film here, shows himself to be a very strong Bond, I must say. I like him here. I definitely want to see more of him. I'm looking forward to License to Kill from this point. I give this film a 7 out of 10. A very good Bond film compared to most of the output that we've had, but definitely room for improvement.